Hello, horror lover. Are you ready for a long night of nightmares? Before we begin, I want to ask you to subscribe to the channel, and especially leave a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I'd love to know. Click the like button, all of this because the harsh fluorescent light of the bathroom flickered, casting an unflattering glow on my reflection. I stood there, naked and vulnerable, my eyes tracing every curve and bulge of my body. The mirror seemed to magnify every imperfection, every stretch mark, every roll of fat that I'd tried so desperately to hide. God, I hate you, I whispered to my reflection, my voice cracking with emotion. I hate what you've become. Tears welled up in my eyes, blurring my vision. I blinked rapidly, sending them cascading down my cheeks. I couldn't bear to look anymore, but I couldn't tear my gaze away either. This was my punishment, my daily ritual of self-loathing. My hand reached out, touching the cold surface of the mirror. For a moment I imagined I could push through it, step into another world where I was thin, beautiful, and confident. But reality crashed back as my fingertips met unyielding glass. A sob escaped my lips, echoing in the small bathroom. I can't do this anymore, I choked out. I can't live like this. The weight of my desperation pressed down on me, suffocating. I'd tried everything. Diets, exercise programs, support groups. Nothing worked. Nothing lasted. I always ended up here, staring at a body I couldn't stand, feeling like a failure. My phone pinged, the sound jarring in the quiet bathroom. I grabbed it, grateful for the distraction. It was an ad. One of those targeted ones that always seemed to know exactly what you were thinking. Tired of failed diets? Sick of the gym? Try Miracle Thin, the revolutionary new diet pill that melts away fat while you sleep. I snorted, ready to swipe it away. But something made me pause. The before and after photos were striking. The testimonials seemed genuine, and God, I was desperate. No, I said aloud, shaking my head. It's probably just another scam. But my finger hovered over the link. What if it wasn't? What if this was the answer I'd been searching for? I clicked. The website was slick, professional. It talked about a breakthrough formula, clinically tested, guaranteed results. My heart raced as I read, hope blooming in my chest for the first time in years. This is it, I whispered, a smile tugging at my lips. This is going to change everything. Before I could second-guess myself, I entered my credit card information and placed an order. As soon as I hit confirm, a wave of excitement washed over me. This was the first day of my new life. The next few days were torture. I checked the mailbox obsessively, jumping every time my phone buzzed with a notification. When the package finally arrived, my hands shook as I tore it open. The bottle was small, innocuous. White pills nestled inside, each one a promise of a better future. I held it up to the light, examining it from every angle. You're my salvation, I murmured, cradling the bottle to my chest. I carried it to the kitchen, setting it on the counter as I filled a glass with water. This was it, the moment of truth. I twisted off the cap, the click of the safety seal breaking sounding like a gunshot in the quiet room. One pill rolled into my palm. It was smaller than I expected, hardly bigger than a baby aspirin. How could something so tiny change my life so dramatically? Here goes nothing, I said, raising the pill to my lips. Wait! I jumped at the sound of my roommate's voice. Sarah stood in the doorway, her eyes wide as she took in the scene. Are those diet pills? She asked, her voice filled with concern. I nodded, unable to speak. Sarah crossed the room in quick strides, reaching for the bottle. Tyler, you can't. These things are dangerous. Remember what happened to Lisa in college? I did remember. Lisa had been hospitalized after taking some sketchy weight loss supplements, but this was different. This was FDA approved. This was safe. It's not like that, I insisted, clutching the bottle to my chest. I've done my research. This is legit. Sarah's face softened. I know you're unhappy, Ty, but this isn't the answer. Why don't we go for a run together? Or I could help you meal prep." "No," I shouted, surprising us both with the vehemence in my voice. "No," I repeated softer this time. "I'm tired of running and salads and feeling like crap. I need this, Sarah. Please understand." She stared at me for a long moment, conflict clear in her eyes. Finally, she sighed. "I can't stop you, but please be careful, and promise me you'll tell me if anything feels off, okay?" I nodded, relief flooding through me. "I promise." Sarah left the kitchen, her shoulders slumped in defeat. I turned back to the pill in my hand. Without giving myself time to reconsider, I popped it into my mouth and washed it down with a gulp of water. It was done. There was no going back now. The next morning, I practically leaped out of bed to check the scale. I held my breath as the numbers flickered, then stabilized, 2 pounds down. "Holy shit," I breathed, staring at the display in disbelief. I stepped off and on again, sure it must be a mistake. But the number remained the same. Elation surged through me. It was working. It was really working. I rushed to get ready for work, my movements fueled by a newfound energy. As I buttoned up my shirt, I could have sworn it felt a little looser. At the office, I couldn't stop smiling. My coworker, Jim, noticed as we grabbed coffee in the break room. "Someone's in a good mood," he commented, raising an eyebrow. "Hot date last night?" I laughed, shaking my head. "Nah, just feeling good." "Well, it suits you," Jim said with a grin. "You're practically glowing." His words sent a thrill through me. Was I already starting to look different? The days flew by in a blur of excitement and anticipation. Each morning brought a new victory on the scale. My clothes started to hang loose and the compliments began rolling in. "Have you lost weight?" my boss asked during a meeting. "You look amazing," gushed the barista at my favorite coffee shop. Even Sarah, despite her initial reservations, couldn't deny the results. "I have to admit, you do look happier," she said one evening as we watched TV. "And healthier. Maybe I was wrong about those pills." I beamed at her, basking in the validation. "They're miracle workers," I said. "I feel like a whole new person." As the first week drew to a close, I stood once again in front of the bathroom mirror. But this time, instead of disgust and despair, I felt a surge of pride and hope. The person staring back at me was still far from perfect, but I could see the changes. My face looked slimmer, my stomach flatter. I turned to the side, admiring my profile. "You're doing it," I told my reflection, grinning widely. "You're really doing it." I snapped a quick before and after photo, posting it to my social media with shaking hands. Within minutes, the likes and comments started pouring in. "OMG, what's your secret? You look incredible. Serious body goals right here." I read each comment with growing excitement. This was everything I'd ever wanted. To be noticed, to be admired, to feel confident in my own skin. As I got ready for bed that night, I held the bottle of pills reverently. "Thank you," I whispered, pressing a kiss to the smooth plastic surface. I fell asleep with a smile on my face, dreaming of the new life that was now within my grasp. In my euphoria, I ignored the slight twinge in my stomach, the metallic taste in my mouth. After all, change didn't come without a little discomfort, right? And this change, this was worth any price. Little did I know as I drifted off into contented slumber, just how steep that price would be. The invitation to my 10-year high school reunion had been sitting on my dresser for months, a constant reminder of the person I used to be. I'd almost thrown it away a dozen times, but something always stopped me. Now, as I stood in front of the full-length mirror in my bedroom, I was glad I'd kept it. "Holy shit," I whispered, turning to see my profile. "Is that really me?" The person staring back at me was a far cry from the overweight, insecure teenager who'd walked the halls of Westfield High. 6 weeks of miracle thin pills had transformed me. I ran my hands down my sides, marveling at the smooth contours where rolls of fat used to be. "Tyler?" Sarah's voice called from the living room. "We're going to be late if you don't hurry up." I took a deep breath, smoothing down my new dress, a size I hadn't worn since freshman year of college. "Coming," I called back, giving myself one last approving look before heading out. Sarah's jaw dropped when she saw me. "Wow," she breathed. "Tyler, you look incredible." I twirled, letting out a girlish giggle that surprised even me. "You think so?" Sarah nodded, her eyes wide. I knew the pills were working, but this is amazing. She paused, a flicker of concern crossing her face. "You're feeling okay, right? No side effects?" I waved away her worry. "Never better," I assured her, ignoring the slight burning sensation in my stomach. It had been there for a few days now, but I chalked it up to my body adjusting to its rapid weight loss. "Come on, let's go show these losers what they've been missing." The reunion was being held in the school gymnasium, now transformed with twinkling lights and gossamer streamers. As we walked in, I felt a surge of confidence I'd never experienced before. Heads turned, conversations paused, and I reveled in every shocked expression. "Tyler Matthews?" A tall, handsome man approached, his brow furrowed in confusion. It took me a moment to recognize him. Jason Cooper, former star quarterback, and the object of my hopeless crush for 4 long years. "Hi, Jason," I said, flashing him a dazzling smile. "Long time no see." His eyes roamed over me, lingering in a way that sent shivers down my spine. "You look different," he said, clearly struggling to reconcile the person in front of him with his memories. I laughed, the sound light and carefree. Amazing what a decade can do, right? As we chatted, more former classmates approached, each reaction feeding my growing ego. People who'd never given me a second glance in high school were now hanging on my every word, competing for my attention. "I need a drink," I announced after what felt like hours of conversation. "Anyone want to join me at the bar?" A chorus of agreement followed me as I made my way across the room. The burning in my stomach had intensified, but I ignored it, riding high on the waves of admiration and envy surrounding me. "So, what's your secret?" Melissa, former head cheerleader, and now a suburban mom of 3, asked as we waited for our drinks. "Personal trainer? Plastic surgery?" I smirked, enjoying the barely concealed jealousy in her voice. "Just clean living and positive thinking," I lied smoothly. There was no way I was sharing my miracle cure with anyone here. As the night wore on, I found myself on the dance floor, moving with an energy and grace I'd never possessed before. The music pulsed through me, drowning out the increasing discomfort in my abdomen. "You've got some moves, Matthews," Jason shouted over the music, his body close to mine. I grinned up at him, years of unrequited longing bubbling to the surface. "You ain't seen nothing yet, Cooper." We danced for what felt like hours, my body electric with the joy of movement and the thrill of attention. As the DJ announced the last song, Jason leaned in close. "Want to get some air?" he asked, his breath hot against my ear. My heart raced as I nodded, allowing him to lead me out to the school's courtyard. The cool night air was a relief after the stuffy gymnasium, and I took a deep breath, wincing slightly at the sharp pain it caused. "You okay?" Jason asked, noticing my discomfort. I forced a smile. "Just needed some fresh air. It's pretty intense in there." He nodded, stepping closer. "You know, I always regretted never asking you out in high school," he said, his voice low and intimate. I raised an eyebrow, skepticism warring with desire. "Oh, really? You barely knew I existed back then." Jason had the grace to look sheepish. "I was an idiot," he admitted. "But I've grown up a lot since then. And seeing you tonight, God, Tyler, you're stunning." Before I could respond, he leaned in and kissed me. It was everything I'd ever dreamed of. Passionate, intense, the culmination of years of fantasy. I melted into it, ignoring the warning signals my body was sending. When we finally broke apart, I was breathless, and not entirely from the kiss. The pain in my stomach had sharpened, and I felt slightly dizzy. "That was," Jason began, but I cut him off. "I need to use the restroom," I said quickly. "I'll be right back." I hurried to the nearest bathroom, locking myself in a stall just as a wave of nausea hit me. I retched, bringing up nothing but bile that burned my throat. "Get it together," I muttered to myself, wiping my mouth with trembling hands. "You're not going to let a little stomach bug ruin this night." I splashed some water on my face and reapplied my lipstick, determined to push through whatever this was. When I returned to the courtyard, Jason was waiting with a concerned expression. "Everything all right?" he asked. I nodded, plastering on a smile. "Perfect. Now, where were we?" The rest of the night passed in a blur of dancing, laughter, and stolen kisses. By the time Sarah and I stumbled home in the early hours of the morning, I was exhausted but elated. "That was amazing," I gushed as we kicked off our shoes. "Did you see everyone's faces? They couldn't believe it was me." Sarah smiled, but there was a hint of worry in her eyes. "It was pretty spectacular," she agreed. "But Tyler, are you sure you're feeling okay? You looked a bit pale towards the end there." I waved off her concern. "Just tired," I assured her. "And maybe a little too much champagne. Nothing a good night's sleep won't fix." But as I lay in bed that night, sleep eluded me. The pain in my stomach had settled into a constant gnawing ache, and my mind raced with the events of the evening. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right, but I pushed it aside, focusing instead on the triumph I'd experienced. The next morning, I woke to a flurry of notifications on my phone. Friend requests, messages, and tags and photos from the reunion flooded my social media. I scrolled through them, grinning at the flattering comments and envious reactions. Ignoring the persistent discomfort in my abdomen, I got up and headed to my closet. It was time for a new wardrobe to match my new body. As I dressed in my now loose clothing, I made a mental note to pick up some antacids at the pharmacy. A little indigestion was a small price to pay for the life I'd always dreamed of. Little did I know, as I stepped out into the bright morning sun, ready to conquer the world, that the price would soon become far steeper than I could have ever imagined. The bliss of my transformation was about to give way to a nightmare beyond my wildest fears. But for now, I was riding high on a wave of confidence and admiration, blind to the danger lurking within my own body. The world was mine for the taking, and I was determined to seize every opportunity with both hands, no matter the cost. The shrill beep of my alarm clock pierced through the fog of sleep, jolting me awake. I groaned, reaching out to silence the offending noise. As I stretched, a sharp stabbing pain in my abdomen made me gasp. "What the hell?" I muttered, sitting up slowly. The pain subsided to a dull ache, and I took a deep breath. It was probably just indigestion from the celebratory dinner I'd had last night. After all, I wasn't used to rich foods anymore, not since I'd started the Miracle Thin pills. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, admiring how they no longer dimpled with cellulite. Despite the discomfort, I couldn't help but smile. The trade-off was worth it. In the bathroom, I went through my morning routine, pointedly avoiding the scale. I'd promised myself I'd only weigh in once a week now, not wanting to become obsessive. As I brushed my teeth, I noticed a slight metallic taste in my mouth. Frowning, I spat into the sink. Was that a hint of pink in the foam? "You're imagining things," I told my reflection sternly. "Stop looking for problems where there aren't any." At work, I basked in the continued attention from my colleagues. It had been weeks since the high school reunion, but people were still commenting on my transformation. "Tyler, you're practically wasting away," exclaimed Janice from accounting as we waited for the elevator. "What's your secret?" I gave her a conspiratorial wink. "If I told you, I'd have to kill you." We both laughed as we stepped into the elevator, but the sudden movement sent a wave of nausea through me. I gripped the handrail, trying to steady myself. "Are you okay?" Janice asked, concern etching her features. "You've gone quite pale." I forced a smile. "Just a bit of motion sickness. I'm fine." But as the morning wore on, it became clear that I was far from fine. The pain in my stomach intensified, coming in waves that left me breathless. By lunchtime, I was doubled over at my desk, cold sweat beading on my forehead. A gentle hand on my shoulder made me look up. It was Jim, my cubicle neighbor. His face creased with worry. "Tyler, you look awful," he said bluntly. "I think you should go home." I tried to protest, but another wave of pain hit me and I couldn't suppress a whimper. Jim's expression hardened. "That's it. I'm calling you a cab." 20 minutes later, I was stumbling through my front door, barely making it to the bathroom before violently emptying the contents of my stomach. As I slumped against the cool porcelain, I caught sight of something that made my blood run cold. There, in the toilet bowl, swirling among the sick, were unmistakable streaks of blood. "Oh God," I whispered, panic rising in my chest. "Oh God, oh God, oh God." With trembling hands, I reached for my phone and dialed the local clinic. The receptionist's cheerful voice grated on my frayed nerves. "Westside Medical, how may I help you?" "I need to see a doctor," I said, my voice shaking. "It's urgent." An hour later, I was sitting on an examination table, trying not to fidget as Dr. Patel reviewed my chart. She was a small woman with kind eyes, but her furrowed brow did nothing to ease my anxiety. "So, Mr. Matthews," she began, looking up from her tablet, "you've been experiencing abdominal pain and vomiting blood?" I nodded, swallowing hard. "Yes. And there's this constant burning sensation in my stomach." "I see." She made a note. "And have you made any significant changes to your diet or lifestyle recently?" I hesitated. Should I tell her about the pills? But no, they were FDA approved. They couldn't be the cause of this. "I've lost some weight," I said finally. "Been eating healthier, exercising more." Dr. Patel hummed non-committally. "Well, let's take a look, shall we?" Her examination was thorough, her fingers probing gently but firmly across my abdomen. I couldn't suppress a gasp of pain when she hit a particularly tender spot. "Sorry about that," she murmured. "Mr. Matthews, I'm going to order some blood tests and an ultrasound. I'd like to rule out any serious conditions." The next few hours passed in a blur of needles, machines, and anxious waiting. By the time Dr. Patel called me back into her office, I was a bundle of raw nerves. She sat behind her desk, a puzzled expression on her face as she looked over my test results. The silence stretched on, each second ratcheting up my anxiety. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "What is it? What's wrong with me?" Dr. Patel looked up, her eyes filled with a mixture of concern and confusion. "Mr. Matthews, your test results are unusual. Your liver enzymes are elevated, and the ultrasound shows some anomalies in your digestive tract." "What does that mean?" I asked, my mouth dry. She leaned forward, her voice gentle. "It means we need to do more tests. These results are consistent with some form of internal corrosion, but I've never seen anything quite like this before." The word corrosion echoed in my head, drowning out the rest of her explanation. Corrosion. Like I was rusting from the inside out. "I'd like to admit you to the hospital for observation," Dr. Patel was saying. "We need to—" "No," I interrupted, standing up abruptly. The room spun, but I steadied myself against the desk. "No, I can't. I have work. I have—" "Mr. Matthews, Tyler," Dr. Patel's voice was firm but kind. "This is serious. We need to find out what's causing this before it gets worse." But I wasn't listening. All I could think about was the bottle of pills sitting on my nightstand at home. This couldn't be happening. Not now. Not when I was finally becoming the person I'd always wanted to be. "I need to go," I muttered, stumbling towards the door. I'll come back tomorrow. I just need some time to think." Dr. Patel called after me, but I was already halfway down the hallway, my heart pounding in my ears. I burst out of the clinic into the fading afternoon light, gulping in deep breaths of air. As I fumbled for my phone to call a ride, a wave of dizziness washed over me. I staggered, my vision blurring. The last thing I remember is the feeling of rough concrete against my cheek and the sound of alarmed voices growing fainter as darkness closed in. When I came to, I was lying in a hospital bed, the steady beep of a heart monitor filling the room. Sarah sat beside me, her face pale and drawn. "Tyler," she said, noticing my open eyes. "Oh, thank God. How are you feeling?" I tried to speak, but my throat was dry and raw. Sarah quickly held a cup of water to my lips, and I sipped gratefully. "What happened?" I croaked. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "You collapsed outside the clinic. They brought you here. Tyler, why didn't you tell me you were sick?" The memory of Dr. Patel's words came flooding back, along with a fresh wave of panic. "The pills," I whispered. "Sarah, it's the pills. They're doing something to me." Her brow furrowed in confusion. "What pills?" "The diet pills. But they're supposed to be safe." Before I could respond, a doctor entered the room, his face grave. "Mr. Matthews, I'm Dr. Reeves. We've been running some tests while you were unconscious and, well, I'm afraid I have some disturbing news." As he spoke, detailing the bizarre and frightening changes happening inside my body, I felt a cold dread settle over me. The miracle cure I'd been so desperate for was turning out to be a nightmare beyond imagination. The blissful high of my transformation was crashing down around me, leaving only fear and regret in its wake. As Dr. Reeves continued his explanation, I closed my eyes, wishing I could go back to that moment in front of the mirror, when I'd made the decision that had set all of this in motion. But there was no going back now. The pills I'd thought would save me were eating me alive, and I was terrified of what the coming days would bring. The soft glow of my laptop screen illuminated the dark hospital room, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The steady beep of the heart monitor provided a rhythmic backdrop to the frantic tapping of my fingers on the keyboard. I'd been at it for hours, searching for answers, for hope, for anything that could explain what was happening to me. "Miracle Thin side effects," I typed into the search bar, my hands shaking slightly. The results loaded and my heart sank. Hundreds of forum posts, news articles, and medical reports filled the screen. I clicked on the first link, a support group for Miracle Thin victims. As I scrolled through the posts, my blood ran cold. The stories were horrifyingly familiar. Rapid weight loss followed by excruciating pain, internal bleeding, organ failure. Some had survived, left with lifelong health issues. Others. I quickly closed that thread, unable to face the grim reality it presented. "This can't be happening," I whispered to myself, running a hand through my thinning hair. Another side effect I'd been trying to ignore. A soft knock at the door made me jump. Sarah peeked in, her face etched with concern. "Tyler, you're still awake?" she asked, stepping into the room. Her eyes fell on the laptop screen, and her expression darkened. "Oh, Ty, you shouldn't be looking at that stuff. You need to rest." I shook my head vehemently. "I need answers, Sarah. The doctors don't know what's going on. Maybe someone out there has found a cure." Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, gently closing the laptop. "The doctors are doing everything they can," Dr. Reeves said. "Dr. Reeves doesn't know shit," I snapped, immediately regretting my outburst when I saw Sarah flinch. "I'm sorry. I'm scared, Sarah." She took my hand, squeezing it gently. "I know. We all are. But we're going to figure this out, okay? You're not alone in this." As if on cue, another wave of pain ripped through my abdomen. I gasped, doubling over. Sarah quickly pressed the call button, her voice rising in panic as she called for a nurse. The next few hours passed in a haze of pain medication and fitful sleep. When I finally regained full consciousness, sunlight was streaming through the windows, and I had made a decision. "I need to call them," I said as soon as Sarah entered the room with a cup of coffee. She frowned, setting the cup down. "Call who?" "Miracle Thin, the company. They need to know what their product is doing to people. They need to stop it." Sarah's frown deepened. "Tyler, I don't think that's a good idea. We should wait for the lawyers to..." But I was already reaching for my phone. With trembling fingers, I dialed the customer service number I'd memorized weeks ago. when Miracle Thin had been my salvation rather than my destruction. A cheerful voice answered on the third ring. "Thank you for calling Miracle Thin, where miracles happen every day. This is Jessica. How may I assist you?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "My name is Tyler Matthews. I've been taking your pills for 2 months and they're killing me. I need to speak to someone in charge. Now." There was a pause, then Jessica's voice returned, noticeably less cheerful. "I'm sorry, sir, but I'm not authorized to—" "Listen to me," I interrupted, my voice rising. "Your pills are corroding my insides. I'm in the hospital. There are others like me. You need to recall this product before more people get hurt." "Sir, I understand you're upset, but I assure you that Miracle Thin has passed all necessary safety regulations. If you're experiencing any discomfort, we recommend you discontinue use and consult your physician. Now, is there anything else I can help you with today?" The rehearsed response sent a surge of rage through me. "Discomfort? I'm dying. Don't you understand? You can't just—" A click, followed by a dial tone. They'd hung up on me. "Bastards!" I yelled, hurling the phone across the room. It hit the wall with a crack, pieces of plastic scattering across the floor. Sarah rushed to my side, her eyes wide with alarm. "Tyler, calm down. Your blood pressure—" But I couldn't calm down. The pain, the fear, the anger, it all came crashing down at once. I broke down, sobs racking my body as Sarah held me, murmuring soothing words I couldn't quite make out. When I finally regained my composure, a grim determination had settled over me. I gently pushed Sarah away, wiping my eyes. "I need my laptop," I said, my voice hoarse but steady. Sarah hesitated. "Tyler, I don't think—" "Please, Sarah, I need to do this." With a resigned sigh, she handed me the laptop. I opened it, navigating to my email. If they won't listen, I'll make them listen. I'm going to tell everyone what these pills are doing. For the next hour, I typed furiously, pouring out my story in excruciating detail. I attached photos of my medical charts, screenshots of my research. When I was done, I had emails ready to send to every news outlet, health organization, and government agency I could think of. My finger hovered over the send button. Was I really ready for this? To become the face of this scandal? To give up any hope of privacy? A particularly sharp pain lanced through my stomach, making the decision for me. I clicked send on every email, then sat back, exhausted but oddly relieved. "It's done," I told Sarah, who had been watching me with a mixture of concern and admiration. Now we wait. We didn't have to wait long. By that evening, my phone, hastily repaired by a sympathetic nurse, was buzzing constantly with calls from reporters, lawyers, and other victims who had seen my story starting to circulate online. Dr. Reeves entered the room, his face grave. "Mr. Matthews, I've just gotten off the phone with a colleague at the FDA. They're launching an investigation into Miracle Thin based on your report and several others that have come in. But—" He paused, his expression softening with sympathy. "I'm afraid it may be too late to undo the damage in your case." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What are you saying?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "The corrosion is spreading faster than we anticipated. We need to consider more aggressive treatment options. There's an experimental procedure." But I was no longer listening. My gaze had drifted to the window, where I could see the sun setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Was this to be one of my last sunsets? "Tyler?" Sarah's voice broke through my reverie. "Tyler, did you hear what the doctor said? There's still hope." I turned back to them, seeing the desperation in their eyes. They wanted me to fight, to cling to any shred of hope. But I was so tired. The constant pain, the fear, the guilt. It was all too much. "I need some time to think," I said quietly. Can I have a moment alone?" They exchanged worried glances but nodded. As they left the room, I could hear them whispering in the hallway, no doubt discussing my fate. Alone, I turned my attention back to the window. The sky had darkened now, the first stars becoming visible. I thought about all the people out there, going about their lives, unaware of the battle raging inside my body. How many of them were taking Miracle Thin right now, believing it would change their lives for the better? My gaze fell on the small orange bottle on my bedside table, my last remaining pills. I had insisted on keeping them despite the doctor's protests, clinging to them like a security blanket. With a sudden, decisive movement, I grabbed the bottle and stumbled to the bathroom. My hands shook as I twisted off the cap, watching as the small white pills clattered into the toilet bowl. "Never again," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Never again." I flushed, watching as the instruments of my destruction swirled away. As I turned to head back to bed, a wave of dizziness washed over me. The room spun and I felt my legs give way beneath me. The last thing I remember is the cold tile against my cheek and the distant sound of alarms blaring. As consciousness slipped away, a single thought echoed in my mind. What have I done to myself? The rhythmic beeping of medical equipment filled the air as I slowly regained consciousness. My eyelids felt heavy, but I forced them open, blinking against the harsh fluorescent lights of the hospital room. Dr. Reeves stood at the foot of my bed, his face a mask of professional concern as he studied a chart. "Welcome back, Mr. Matthews," he said, noticing I was awake. "You gave us quite a scare." I tried to speak, but my throat was dry and raw. A nurse appeared by my side, offering me a small cup of water with a straw. I sipped gratefully, wincing at the pain in my throat. "What happened?" I managed to croak out. Dr. Reeves's expression grew grave. "You collapsed in the bathroom. We had to perform emergency surgery to stop internal bleeding." He paused, seeming to weigh his next words carefully. "Mr. Matthews, Tyler, I'm afraid I have some difficult news." My heart began to race, the monitor beside me betraying my rising panic. "What is it?" I whispered, dreading the answer. Dr. Reeves took a deep breath. "The damage from the Miracle Thin pills is more extensive than we initially thought. Your organs, they're dissolving, Tyler. It's unlike anything I've ever seen before." The words hit me like a physical blow. Dissolving. My organs were dissolving. I felt the room start to spin, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. "Nurse, get him some oxygen," Dr. Reeves ordered sharply. As the nurse fitted an oxygen mask over my face, he continued, his voice gentler now. "We've contacted some specialists. They're flying in as we speak. We're going to do everything we can, Tyler." I nodded numbly, unable to form words. Dr. Reeves squeezed my shoulder reassuringly before leaving the room, no doubt to confer with his team about my dire situation. Hours passed in a haze of tests, scans, and hushed conversations just outside my door. Finally, a new doctor entered, a tall, stern-looking woman with graying hair pulled back in a tight bun. "Mr. Matthews, I'm Dr. Eliza Chen," she introduced herself, her voice clipped and professional. "I specialize in rare metabolic disorders. I'd like to show you something if you feel up to it." I nodded weakly, and Dr. Chen wheeled over a portable screen. She pulled up a series of images. My CT scans, I realized with a jolt. "This," she said, pointing to the first image, "is what a healthy digestive system should look like." She swiped to the next image, and I couldn't suppress a gasp of horror. The organs were misshapen, riddled with what looked like holes. "And this," Dr. Chen continued, her voice softening slightly, "is your current scan." I stared at the image, unable to reconcile it with my own body. How is this possible?" I whispered. Dr. Chen's expression was grim. "The active ingredient in Miracle Thin, a compound called XR714, was originally developed as an experimental solvent for industrial use. It appears that when ingested, it begins to break down organic matter. In this case, your internal organs." The room seemed to tilt around me as the full horror of the situation sank in. "You're saying these pills are eating me from the inside out?" Dr. Chen nodded solemnly. "I'm afraid so. The weight loss you experienced was not fat being burned, but your own body being dissolved. A wave of nausea washed over me, and I barely had time to lean over before I was retching into a bedpan. Dr. Chen waited patiently until I was finished, then handed me a tissue. "I know this is a lot to take in," she said, her professional demeanor cracking slightly to reveal genuine sympathy. "But understanding what we're dealing with is the first step in fighting it." Fighting it. The word sparked a glimmer of hope in the darkness that had enveloped me. "So there's a chance? You can fix this?" Dr. Chen hesitated, and in that moment of silence, I felt my hope begin to crumble. "We're going to try everything we can," she said finally. "But I have to be honest with you, Tyler. The damage is extensive. We're in uncharted territory here." I closed my eyes, fighting back tears. "How long?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Without intervention? Weeks, maybe a month." Dr. Chen's voice was gentle but firm. "But we're not giving up. We're going to explore every option, every experimental treatment available." As Dr. Chen continued to explain the battery of treatments they were proposing, my mind drifted. I thought of all the people out there still taking Miracle Thin, blissfully unaware of the ticking time bomb in their bodies. I had to warn them, had to stop this before more lives were destroyed. "I need to make a statement," I interrupted Dr. Chen mid-sentence. "To the press. People need to know what these pills are doing." Dr. Chen frowned. "Mr. Matthews, in your condition, I don't think—" "Please," I begged. "I might not have much time left. Let me use it to save others." After a moment of consideration, Dr. Chen nodded. "I'll speak with the hospital's PR department, but you need to rest now. Save your strength." As she left the room, I sank back into my pillows, exhausted but determined. I may have been naive enough to fall for Miracle Thin's false promises, but I wouldn't let others make the same mistake. The next few hours passed in a blur of preparation. The hospital's PR team briefed me on what I could and couldn't say. Lawyers hovered nearby with concerned expressions, and a small army of nurses worked to make me look as presentable as possible given the circumstances. Finally, it was time. A makeshift press area had been set up in a conference room, and I was wheeled in, oxygen tank in tow. The room fell silent as I entered, dozens of eyes and camera lenses trained on me. I took a deep breath, wincing at the pain it caused, and began to speak. "My name is Tyler Matthews," I said, my voice shaky but determined. 2 months ago, I started taking a diet pill called Miracle Thin. I thought it would change my life. Instead, it's killing me. I went on to detail my experience, the rapid weight loss, the pain, the horrifying discovery of what was happening inside my body. As I spoke, I could see the shock and horror dawning on the faces of the reporters. "To anyone out there taking Miracle Thin, or thinking about taking it," I pleaded, my voice growing stronger with urgency, "stop. Now. It's not worth it. No amount of weight loss is worth destroying your body from the inside out." Questions erupted as soon as I finished speaking. I answered as many as I could, fighting through the pain and exhaustion. By the time the press conference was over, I was drained, both physically and emotionally. As I was wheeled back to my room, I caught sight of a TV in the hallway. My face was already on the screen, the ticker below reading "Breaking News, Diet Pill Horror Story." Back in my room, I found Sarah waiting, her eyes red from crying. "Oh, Tyler," she said, rushing to my side. "You were so brave out there." I managed a weak smile. "Had to be done," I murmured. "Couldn't let this happen to anyone else." Sarah took my hand, squeezing it gently. "The doctors say your parents will be here soon, and there's something else." I raised an eyebrow questioningly. "A lawyer called," Sarah explained. "He says there are others, Tyler, other victims of Miracle Thin. They want to file a class action lawsuit against the company. They're asking if you'll be the lead plaintiff." I closed my eyes, considering. The thought of a lengthy legal battle was exhausting. But then I thought of all the people out there still in danger, still unaware of what these pills could do. "Tell them I'll do it," I said, opening my eyes with renewed determination. Whatever it takes to stop this from happening to anyone else. Sarah nodded, tears in her eyes. You're going to beat this, Tyler. You have to. As she left to make the call, I turned my gaze to the window. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. I wondered how many more sunsets I would see. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a sense of purpose. If these were to be my final days, I would spend them fighting. Not just for my life, but for the lives of all those who might fall victim to the false promises of a miracle cure. The road ahead would be hard, filled with pain and uncertainty, but I was no longer alone in this fight. And maybe, just maybe, some good could come from my suffering. With that thought, I closed my eyes, allowing myself to drift off into a fitful sleep. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new challenges. But for now, I had done what I could. I had told my story. I had sounded the alarm. And in doing so, I had taken the first step towards redemption. The antiseptic smell of the hospital had become a constant companion, as familiar to me now as the scent of my own home. I sat in a wheelchair, staring out the window at the bustling city below, waiting for the orderly to take me to my first chemotherapy session. The irony wasn't lost on me, fighting to save a body I had so willingly poisoned in pursuit of perfection. A gentle knock on the door frame pulled me from my thoughts. I turned to see Dr. Chen, her usually stern face softened with what looked like cautious optimism. "Good morning, Tyler," she said, stepping into the room. "Are you ready for today?" I nodded, trying to muster a smile. As ready as I'll ever be, I suppose, though I have to admit I never thought I'd be looking forward to pumping more chemicals into my body. Dr. Chen's lips twitched in a small smile. "This is different, Tyler. We're fighting back now." She paused, consulting the tablet in her hands. "I wanted to go over the treatment plan with you one more time before we start." As she explained the cocktail of drugs they would be using, a combination of traditional chemotherapy agents and experimental compounds designed to counteract the effects of XR714, I found my mind wandering. I thought of all the other victims out there, wondering if they were receiving the same level of care, if they even knew yet what was happening to their bodies. "Tyler?" Dr. Chen's voice snapped me back to reality. "Did you hear what I said?" I blinked, embarrassed. "I'm sorry. Could you repeat that?" She sighed, but her eyes were understanding. I said, "This isn't going to be easy. The side effects can be severe. But it's our best chance at halting the progression of the damage." I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. "I understand. Let's do this." The orderly arrived then, ready to wheel me down to the oncology ward. As we made our way through the sterile corridors, I couldn't help but notice the stares and whispers that followed us. My story had been all over the news for days now, and even here in the hospital, I was a minor celebrity, though not for reasons anyone would envy. The chemotherapy room was bright and airy, with large windows overlooking a small garden. Several other patients were already there, hooked up to IV drips, some reading, others dozing. A nurse greeted us with a warm smile. "Mr. Matthews, I'm Nurse Olivia. I'll be taking care of you today." She helped me settle into a comfortable recliner, then began preparing the IV line. "First time?" she asked gently. I nodded, suddenly feeling very young and scared. Is it going to hurt?" Olivia's smile was sympathetic. "You might feel a little cold at first, and some patients experience a metallic taste, but we'll be monitoring you closely, and there's medication if you start feeling nauseous." As the first drops of chemotherapy drugs entered my system, I closed my eyes, trying to imagine them as tiny warriors, battling against the destructive force of the miracle-thin pills. The fantasy was short-lived, however, as a wave of nausea washed over me. Hours passed in a haze of discomfort and medication. By the time the session was over, I felt utterly drained, as if every ounce of energy had been leached from my body. As Olivia disconnected the IV, She noticed my pallor. "Rough first round, huh?" she said softly. "It often gets easier as your body adjusts. Try to rest now." Back in my room, I collapsed onto the bed, too exhausted even to change out of my hospital gown. I must have dozed off because the next thing I knew, Sarah was gently shaking me awake. "Tyler? Hon, wake up, there's someone here to see you." I blinked groggily, my vision slowly focusing on a tall man in an expensive suit standing at the foot of my bed. He had a kind face, but his eyes were sharp and assessing. "Mr. Matthews," he said, stepping forward. "I'm Richard Dawson from Dawson Associates. I'm the lawyer handling your case against Miracle Thin." I struggled to sit up, Sarah quickly adjusting my pillows to support me. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Dawson," I said, my voice hoarse. "I'm sorry, I'm not at my best right now." Dawson waved away my apology. "No need to apologize. I understand you've just had your first chemotherapy session. How are you feeling?" I managed a weak chuckle. "Like I've been hit by a truck, but I'm still here, so I guess that's something." Dawson nodded, his expression turning serious. "Mr. Matthews, Tyler, I wanted to update you on the case. Since your press conference, we've been inundated with calls from other Miracle Thin victims. The class action lawsuit is growing by the day." A mixture of emotions washed over me. Relief that others were coming forward, horror at the scale of the damage, and a grim satisfaction that Miracle Thin would be held accountable. "That's good, I suppose," I said slowly. "How many?" "Over 500 so far," Dawson replied. "And we expect that number to grow. Your bravery in coming forward has given others the courage to speak up." I closed my eyes, overwhelmed. 500 lives, at least, forever altered by a pill that promised miracles and delivered nightmares. "There's something else," Dawson continued, his tone cautious. "Miracle Thin's parent company, New Life Pharmaceuticals, has reached out. They want to settle." My eyes snapped open. "Settle? Already?" Dawson nodded. "They're scared, Tyler. Your story has tanked their stock price, and they're facing investigations from the FDA and the Justice Department. They want this to go away as quickly and quietly as possible." I felt a surge of anger, hot and fierce. "And what about us? The people whose lives they've destroyed? Do they think they can just throw money at this and make it disappear?" "I understand your anger," Dawson said calmly. "But a settlement could mean immediate funds for medical care for all the victims. It could mean holding the company accountable without a lengthy court battle that many of the victims might not survive to see the end of." His words hit home, and I felt the anger drain away, replaced by a bone-deep weariness. "What do you think we should do?" I asked. Dawson considered for a moment. "I think we should hear them out. But ultimately, as the lead plaintiff, the decision will be yours, Tyler. Whatever you decide, we'll support you." I nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders. "When?" "They want to meet tomorrow. I know it's soon, and if you're not feeling up to it—" "No," I interrupted. "Tomorrow is fine. I want this over with." After Dawson left, Sarah sat on the edge of my bed, taking my hand in hers. "Are you sure about this, Tyler? You've been through so much already today." I squeezed her hand weakly. "I have to do this, Sarah. For everyone who's suffering because of these pills, I have to see it through." She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "You're the bravest person I know, Tyler Matthews." As the day wore on, the side effects of the chemotherapy intensified. I spent most of the night alternating between bouts of nausea and fitful sleep. By morning, I felt hollowed out, as if the drugs had scoured me from the inside. But as I sat in the conference room, facing the team of lawyers and executives from New Life Pharmaceuticals, I found a reserve of strength I didn't know I had. I listened as they outlined their settlement offer: a fund of billions of dollars for victim compensation and medical care, a full recall of Miracle Thin, and a public admission of wrongdoing. When they finished, all eyes turned to me. I took a deep breath, wincing at the pain it caused in my ravaged body. "Your offer is generous," I began, my voice stronger than I expected. But money can't undo the damage you've caused. It can't give people back the years you've stolen from them. The CEO of New Life, a polished woman in her 50s, leaned forward. Mr. Matthews, we understand your anger. We're truly sorry for... Sorry doesn't cut it, I interrupted. I want guarantees. I want oversight. I want to make sure nothing like this ever happens again. For the next hour, we negotiated. By the end, we had a deal that included not just financial compensation, but also funding for research into treatments for XR7 Warptoon damage, independent oversight of New Life's research and development processes, and a commitment to reforming the way diet supplements are tested and marketed. As I signed the agreement, I felt a mix of exhaustion and triumph. It wasn't a perfect solution. Nothing could be, given the circumstances. But it was a start. A way to ensure that some good could come from this tragedy. Back in my hospital room, as the adrenaline of the meeting wore off, I felt the full weight of the day's events crash down on me. Sarah found me curled up in bed, silent tears streaming down my face. "Oh, Tyler," she murmured, climbing onto the bed and wrapping her arms around me. "It's okay. You did it. You won." I clung to her, my body shaking with sobs. "Did I?" I whispered. "It doesn't feel like winning. It feels like the beginning of a very long, very hard fight." Sarah stroked my hair gently. "Then we'll fight it together. Every step of the way." As I drifted off to sleep in Sarah's arms, I thought about the battle ahead. The chemotherapy, the long road to recovery, the challenge of rebuilding a life and a body forever changed by miracle thin. It would be hard. Perhaps the hardest thing I'd ever done, but for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a glimmer of hope. I had taken on a pharmaceutical giant and won. I had given a voice to hundreds of victims. I had taken the first step towards redemption. The battle was far from over, but I was ready to fight. The morning sun filtered through the hospital room's blinds, casting striped shadows across my gaunt face. I stared at my reflection in the small mirror Sarah had brought me, barely recognizing the person looking back. My once full cheeks were sunken, dark circles underlined my eyes, and clumps of hair lay scattered on my pillow. Casualties of the aggressive chemotherapy. A soft knock at the door interrupted my self-scrutiny. "Come in," I called, my voice raspy from disuse. The door creaked open, and to my surprise, Jason stepped in. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't seen him since the high school reunion, since before everything. "Tyler," he said hesitantly, his eyes widening as he took in my appearance. Wow, I hardly recognized you." I attempted a smile, but it felt more like a grimace. "Yeah, the chemo chic look isn't quite as flattering as I'd hoped." Jason chuckled nervously, taking a few steps closer. "I've been following your story in the news. I can't believe what you've been through. I wanted to come sooner, but you were scared." I finished for him. It wasn't a question. He nodded, shame coloring his cheeks. "I'm sorry, Tyler. I should have been here for you." I shrugged, wincing at the movement. "It's okay. Not everyone can handle this." I gestured vaguely at my frail body. Jason moved closer, reaching out as if to take my hand, but then seemed to think better of it. "How are you feeling?" "Really?" I considered lying, putting on a brave face, but I was too tired for pretenses. "Honestly, terrible. The chemo it's brutal. Some days I wonder if the cure is worse than the disease." Jason's face crumpled with sympathy. "God, Tyler, I'm so sorry. Is there anything I can do?" I was about to reply when a wave of nausea hit me. I lurched for the bedpan, retching violently. When I looked up, panting and wiping my mouth, I saw Jason had recoiled, his face a mask of horror and disgust. I should go," he stammered, already backing towards the door. "I'm sorry, I can't. I'll call you, okay?" Before I could respond, he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him. I slumped back against my pillows, a mixture of hurt and anger churning in my gut alongside the nausea. "Coward," I whispered to the empty room, tears stinging my eyes. Hours passed in a haze of pain and self-pity. The nurses came and went, adjusting my IV, checking my vitals, their faces blending into a parade of professional concern. It wasn't until late afternoon that something broke through my fog of misery. My phone, which had been silent for days, suddenly lit up with a notification. An email from an address I didn't recognize. Curiosity piqued. I opened it. Dear Mr. Matthews, my name is Dr. Amelia Winters. I was a research scientist at New Life Pharmaceuticals until 2 weeks ago. I've been following your case closely, and I can no longer stay silent. There's information about Miracle Thin and XR714 that hasn't come to light yet. Information that could be crucial to your treatment and to holding New Life truly accountable. I want to help, but I'm taking a huge risk in contacting you. New Life's lawyers made me sign ironclad NDAs when I left. If they find out I'm talking to you, I could lose everything. If you're willing to hear me out, I can meet you at the hospital tomorrow. Let me know. Dr. Winters. My heart raced as I read and reread the email. A whistleblower from New Life? This could change everything. With shaking hands, I typed out a reply agreeing to meet. The next day dawned with a newfound sense of purpose. For the first time in weeks, I insisted on getting dressed in real clothes instead of a hospital gown. Sarah helped me into a comfortable sweater and sweatpants, her eyes shining with hope at seeing me so animated. Are you sure about this? She asked as she helped me into a wheelchair. We don't know anything about this woman. What if it's a trap? I squeezed her hand reassuringly. It's a risk we have to take. If there's any chance she has information that could help, I have to hear her out. We wheeled down to a small meeting room in the hospital's administrative wing. Dr. Chen was already there along with Richard Dawson, my lawyer. We had agreed it was best to have them present for the meeting. At precisely 2 p.m. there was a knock at the door. A petite woman with short gray hair and sharp, intelligent eyes entered. She looked nervous but determined. Dr. Winters? I asked. She nodded, taking a seat across from me. Mr. Matthews, thank you for agreeing to meet with me. I know you're taking a risk too. I leaned forward, ignoring the twinge of pain the movement caused. You said you have information about Miracle Thin. What kind of information? Dr. Winters took a deep breath. New Life knew. They knew about the side effects of XR714 long before Miracle Thin went to market. They had data from animal trials showing organ deterioration, but they buried it. They pushed forward with human trials anyway, using less than ethical methods to hide the negative results. The room fell silent as the implications of her words sank in. It was Dawson who spoke first, his voice tight with controlled anger. Do you have proof of these claims, Dr. Winters? She nodded, pulling a flash drive from her pocket. Everything's here. Lab reports, internal memos, emails. It's all heavily encrypted, of course. I couldn't risk New Life tracking it. As Dawson took the flash drive, his eyes gleaming with the promise of damning evidence, I felt a surge of vindication. But it was quickly tempered by a more pressing concern. What about treatment? I asked, my voice urgent. Is there anything in there that could help us fight this? Dr. Winters's expression softened. There might be. In the later stages of research, we were working on a compound that showed promise in reversing some of the damage caused by XR714. It never made it to human trials. New Life shut down the project when they realized it might implicate them in wrongdoing. But the data is all there. In the right hands, it could be the key to developing an effective treatment. Hope, fragile but persistent, bloomed in my chest. I turned to Dr. Chen, who was already scrolling through the data on her tablet, her brow furrowed in concentration. Could this really help? I asked, trying to keep the desperation out of my voice. Dr. Chen looked up, a cautious smile on her face. It's preliminary, but yes, I think it could. This could be the breakthrough we've been looking for. The room erupted in a flurry of activity. Dawson was on the phone with his team, preparing to incorporate this new evidence into our case. Dr. Chen was furiously taking notes, already planning out new treatment protocols. Sarah was crying, happy tears this time, squeezing my hand so tight it almost hurt. But amidst the excitement, I noticed Dr. Winters sitting quietly, a look of mingled relief and fear on her face. I wheeled over to her, taking her hand in mine. "Thank you," I said softly. "I know what this must have cost you. We'll make sure you're protected, I promise." She smiled, squeezing my hand gently. It was the right thing to do. I just wish I'd had the courage to do it sooner. As the day wore on, the full impact of Dr. Winters' revelation began to sink in. This wasn't just about my case anymore. It was about exposing a level of corporate greed and negligence that went beyond anything we'd imagined. It was about potentially saving the lives of hundreds, maybe thousands of people who had fallen victim to Miracle Thin's false promises. That night, as I lay in my hospital bed, exhausted but too wired to sleep, I thought about the roller coaster of emotions the day had brought. The betrayal of Jason's fair-weather friendship, the hope kindled by Dr. Winters' bravery, the possibility of a cure that had seemed impossible just hours ago. Sarah, who had refused to leave my side, stirred in the chair next to my bed. "You should be sleeping," she murmured, her eyes still closed. I reached out, taking her hand. "I know. I just can't stop thinking about everything that happened today. It's a lot to process." She opened her eyes, smiling softly. "I know. But try to rest. Tomorrow's a big day." She was right. Tomorrow, I would start a new experimental treatment based on Dr. Winters' research. It was risky, untested, with potential side effects we couldn't even begin to predict. But it was also my best chance, maybe my only chance. As I finally drifted off to sleep, I found myself thinking not of the risks, but of the possibilities. For the first time since this nightmare began, I allowed myself to imagine a future, a real future, not just borrowed time. A future where I was healthy, where Miracle Thin was nothing but a cautionary tale, where the sacrifices of people like Dr. Winters had made the world a little bit safer. It was a beautiful dream. And tomorrow, we would take the first step towards making it a reality. But as consciousness faded, a small voice in the back of my mind whispered a warning. The battle was far from over. New life wouldn't go down without a fight. And my body, already ravaged by Miracle Thin and weakened by chemotherapy, would be pushed to its limits by this new treatment. The road ahead would be hard, perhaps harder than anything I'd faced so far. But as I teetered on the edge of sleep, I made a silent promise to myself and to all the other victims out there. I would fight. With every ounce of strength I had left, I would fight. For justice, for redemption, for a future free from the shadow of Miracle Thin. Whatever it took, whatever the cost, I would see this through to the end. With that resolve firmly in place, I finally surrendered to sleep, ready to face whatever challenges the new day would bring. The early morning news blared from the small TV in my hospital room, jerking me awake from a fitful sleep. I blinked, disoriented, until the words on the screen came into focus. Breaking news. New Life Pharmaceuticals. CEO arrested in Miracle Thin scandal. I fumbled for the remote, turning up the volume as a stern-faced news anchor continued. In a dramatic turn of events, FBI agents arrested Elaine Cho, CEO of New Life Pharmaceuticals, at her home in the early hours of this morning. Cho is facing charges of fraud, negligence, and conspiracy in connection with the Miracle Thin diet pill controversy. This arrest comes in the wake of damning evidence provided by a whistleblower. A surge of emotions washed over me, relief, vindication, and a grim satisfaction that justice was finally being served. I reached for my phone, my fingers shaking as I dialed Sarah's number. "Tyler?" Sarah's sleepy voice answered. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" "Turn on the news," I said, my voice hoarse with excitement. "They've arrested the CEO of New Life. It's happening, Sarah. It's really happening." I heard rustling on the other end of the line, then a gasp as Sarah saw the news. "Oh my God, Tyler, this is huge. How are you feeling?" I paused, taking stock of my body. The experimental treatment based on Dr. Winters' research had been grueling, with side effects that rivaled even the worst of my chemotherapy days. But today, for the first time in weeks, I felt different. Not better exactly, but not worse either. "I'm okay," I said, surprising myself with the realization. "Actually, I think I might be a little better today." Sarah's relief was palpable even through the phone. "That's wonderful, Tyler. I'll be there soon, okay? We can celebrate together." As I waited for Sarah to arrive, my phone buzzed with messages and calls from other Miracle Thin victims. The arrest of Elaine Cho had galvanized our community, sparking hope and a renewed sense of purpose. One message, from a woman named Maria, whose story had become intertwined with mine through our shared struggle, caught my eye. "Tyler, have you seen the news? I can't stop crying. For the first time since this nightmare began, I feel like we might actually win this fight. Thank you for giving us a voice. You're our hero." I stared at the message, a lump forming in my throat. Hero. The word felt foreign, undeserved. I was just a guy who'd made a terrible mistake and was trying to make it right. But if my story could inspire others, give them hope in their darkest moments, maybe that was a kind of heroism. A soft knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. Dr. Chen entered, a cautious smile on her face and a folder tucked under her arm. "Good morning, Tyler," she said, her tone measured but optimistic. "I assume you've seen the news?" I nodded, gesturing to the TV still playing footage of Elaine Cho being led away in handcuffs. "It's surreal. I never thought we'd see this day." Dr. Chen's smile widened. "It's a big step forward, but that's not the only good news I have for you today." She opened the folder, pulling out a series of charts and images. "Your latest test results came back this morning. Tyler, the treatment is working. We're seeing a significant slowdown in the progression of the organ damage." I stared at her, hardly daring to believe what I was hearing. Are you sure?" She nodded, her professional demeanor cracking to reveal genuine joy. "I've triple-checked the results myself. It's not a cure, not yet. But it's the first real sign of improvement we've seen. The treatment Dr. Winters helped develop. It's giving your body a fighting chance." Tears welled up in my eyes, a mix of relief, gratitude, and tentative hope. "So what happens now?" Dr. Chen sat on the edge of my bed, her expression turning serious. "We continue the treatment, monitor you closely. There's still a long road ahead, Tyler. Your body has been through immense trauma, and recovery will be slow and challenging. But for the first time, I can say with confidence that recovery is a real possibility." As the implications of her words sank in, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, a weight I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. For months, I'd been living on borrowed time, fighting not for recovery, but merely for a few more days, a few more hours. The idea that I might have a future beyond this hospital room, beyond the next treatment or the next crisis, was almost too much to comprehend. Sarah arrived just as Dr. Chen was leaving, her face flushed with excitement from the news and the rush to get to the hospital. She took one look at my tear-streaked face and Dr. Chen's smile and let out a cry of joy, enveloping me in a gentle but fierce hug. "It's working?" she asked, her voice muffled against my shoulder. "The treatment's really working?" I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. We held each other for a long moment, years of fear and pain and desperate hope pouring out in shared tears. As the day wore on, my room became a hub of activity. Richard Dawson arrived with updates on the legal proceedings, his usually composed demeanor cracking with excitement as he detailed the implications of Cho's arrest. "This changes everything," he said, pacing the small room. "With the CEO in custody and the evidence from Dr. Winters, we're in a position to push for a much more comprehensive settlement. Not just financial compensation, but real systemic changes in how these companies operate." I listened, trying to focus on Dawson's words, but my mind kept drifting. I was grateful for the legal victories, for the justice being served, but in that moment all I could think about was the possibility of a future I'd thought lost forever. As evening fell, the excitement of the day began to take its toll. Exhaustion crept in, my body reminding me that despite the good news, I was still very much in recovery. Sarah, ever attentive, noticed my flagging energy. "All right, that's enough for today," she announced, gently but firmly ushering Dawson and the nurses out of the room. "Tyler needs to rest." Once we were alone, Sarah sat beside me, taking my hand in hers. "How are you really feeling?" she asked softly. "This is a lot to process." I sighed, sinking back into my pillows. "Overwhelmed," I admitted. "Grateful. Terrified." Sarah squeezed my hand. "Terrified? Of what?" I closed my eyes, voicing the fear that had been growing all day. "Of hope," I whispered. "I've spent so long preparing for the worst, Sarah. I don't know if I remember how to hope for something better." Sarah was quiet for a moment, her thumb tracing soothing circles on the back of my hand. When she spoke, her voice was firm but gentle. "Then we'll learn together. One day at a time, okay? We'll face whatever comes next, good or bad, together." I nodded, too exhausted for words but profoundly grateful for her unwavering support. As I drifted off to sleep, my mind swirled with images of a future I'd thought lost. A future of health, of purpose, of life beyond the shadow of Miracle Thin. The next few weeks passed in a blur of treatments, tests, and cautious optimism. Each day brought small victories, a little more energy, a little less pain, test results that showed slow but steady improvement. The experimental treatment continued to show promise, not just for me, but for other Miracle Thin victims who had started similar protocols. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were setbacks, days when the pain was overwhelming, when the side effects of the treatment left me weak and nauseous. The legal battle, despite the arrest of Elaine Cho, dragged on, with New Life's army of lawyers fighting tooth and nail against every claim. Through it all, the support of the Miracle Thin victim community kept me going. Messages poured in daily, stories of struggle and resilience, words of encouragement and gratitude. I found myself spending hours each day responding, offering what comfort and hope I could. It was during one of these sessions, about a month after Cho's arrest, that I received a call from Dr. Chen. "Tyler," she said, her voice tight with barely contained excitement. "I need you to come down to my office. There's something you need to see." Intrigued and a little nervous, I made my way down to her office, moving slowly but under my own power. Another small victory. When I entered, I found not just Dr. Chen, but also Dr. Winters, who had become an integral part of the research team working on the XR7-Womtor antidote. "What's going on?" I asked, looking between their beaming faces. Dr. Chen gestured to a series of images on her computer screen. "These are your latest scans, Tyler. Compare them to where we started." I leaned in, my breath catching in my throat as I saw the difference. Where once there had been a landscape of damage and decay, now there were clear signs of healing. It wasn't complete, not by a long shot, but it was undeniable. "Does this mean—" I couldn't finish the sentence, afraid to voice the hope aloud. Dr. Winters stepped forward, her eyes shining. "It means the treatment is working better than we could have hoped. Your body is actually beginning to repair the damage caused by XR7-Womtor." I sank into a chair, overwhelmed. "So I'm going to be okay?" Dr. Chen's smile was cautious but genuine. "You have a long road ahead, Tyler. But yes, I believe you're going to be okay. More than okay. You're going to have a chance at a full life." As the implications of her words sank in, I felt a laugh bubble up from deep inside me. A sound of pure joy I hadn't heard from my own lips in what felt like a lifetime. It was a laugh of relief, of gratitude, of hope reborn. In that moment, I knew we had reached a turning point. Not just for me, but for all the victims of Miracle Thin. We had faced the darkest depths of corporate greed and medical malpractice, and we were emerging on the other side, battered and scarred but alive and fighting. The battle wasn't over. There would be more challenges ahead, physical, legal, emotional. But for the first time since I'd swallowed that first Miracle Thin pill, I felt truly, unequivocally alive. As I left Dr. Chen's office that day, I made a silent vow. I would use this second chance, this miraculous turn of events, to continue the fight. Not just for myself, but for every person whose life had been upended by the false promises of a miracle cure. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but with each step, with each small victory, we would reclaim our lives and our futures. And in doing so, we would ensure that the legacy of Miracle Thin was not one of destruction, but of resilience, justice, and hope. The steady beep of medical equipment filled the air as I slowly regained consciousness. My eyelids felt heavy, but I forced them open, blinking against the harsh, fluorescent lights of the hospital room. The familiar scent of antiseptic and the sight of IV lines snaking from my arms told me I was back in intensive care. "Tyler, can you hear me?" Sarah's voice, thick with worry, came from somewhere to my left. I turned my head, wincing at the stiffness in my neck. Sarah's face came into focus, her eyes red-rimmed from crying, but a relieved smile spreading across her features. What happened?" I croaked, my throat dry and raw. Sarah reached for a cup of water, holding the straw to my lips. As I sipped gratefully, she explained, "You had a setback. The new treatment. There were complications. You've been unconscious for 3 days." The memories came flooding back. The experimental procedure, the searing pain that had torn through my body, the world fading to black as alarms blared around me. Did it work?" I asked, afraid of the answer. Before Sarah could respond, Dr. Chen entered the room, her face a mask of professional concern. "Welcome back, Tyler," she said, moving to check my vitals. "You gave us quite a scare." I swallowed hard, steeling myself. "Just tell me, Doc, how bad is it?" Dr. Chen's expression softened. "Actually, Tyler, the news is cautiously good. The procedure was more intense than we anticipated, which is what caused your collapse. But..." She paused, a small smile playing at her lips. "The latest tests show significant improvement. The damage from XR7-Wavertine has been halted, and we're seeing signs of tissue regeneration." I stared at her, hardly daring to believe what I was hearing. "You mean I'm getting better?" Dr. Chen nodded. "It's early days and you have a long recovery ahead, but yes, Tyler, you're getting better." The room spun around me, and for a moment I thought I might pass out again. Sarah gripped my hand tightly, anchoring me. "It worked," I whispered, tears welling in my eyes. It really worked. The next few weeks passed in a blur of tests, physical therapy, and cautious optimism. Slowly but surely I regained my strength. The constant pain that had been my companion for months began to recede, replaced by a newfound energy I had almost forgotten was possible. One morning, about a month after the procedure, I stood in front of the full-length mirror in my hospital room, really looking at myself for the first time in ages. The gaunt, sickly figure I had become was starting to fill out. There was color in my cheeks, and the dark circles under my eyes had faded. A knock at the door interrupted my self-examination. "Come in," I called, turning away from the mirror. Richard Dawson entered, a thick folder tucked under his arm and a grim expression on his face. "Tyler," he greeted me, his tone serious. "We need to talk." I nodded, gesturing for him to sit. "What's going on, Richard? Is it about the case?" Dawson sighed heavily, opening the folder. "The good news is, with the evidence from Dr. Winters and your miraculous recovery, we're in a very strong position. New Life is desperate to settle." I frowned, sensing there was more. "And the bad news? They want you to sign a non-disclosure agreement. If you accept their settlement, you won't be able to speak publicly about what happened to you or about Miracle Thin." The words hit me like a physical blow. After everything I'd been through, everything I'd fought for, they wanted me to stay silent? "Absolutely not," I said, my voice hard. "I won't be bought off. People need to know the truth about what these pills did to us." Dawson nodded as if he'd expected this response. I understand, Tyler, but I need you to consider this carefully. The settlement they're offering, it's substantial, enough to cover all your medical expenses with plenty left over to set you up for life. I shook my head vehemently. It's not about the money, Richard. It never has been. This is about justice, about making sure this never happens to anyone else. Dawson leaned forward, his expression earnest. I know, Tyler, and I admire your principles, but think about the other victims. Many of them desperately need this settlement money for their ongoing medical care. If you refuse, if we go to trial, it could be years before they see any compensation. His words gave me pause. I thought of Maria, of all the other Miracle Thin victims I'd connected with over the past months. Could I really put my principles above their immediate needs? I need some time to think about this, I said finally. Dawson nodded, standing to leave. Of course. Take all the time you need. But Tyler, whatever you decide, know that you've already done more for this cause than anyone could have asked. After he left, I sank onto my bed, my mind whirling. The idea of staying silent, of letting new life off the hook, made my stomach churn. But the thought of denying the other victims the compensation they so desperately needed was equally unbearable. I was still lost in thought when Sarah arrived for her daily visit. One look at my face told her something was wrong. Tyler, what happened? She asked, sitting beside me on the bed. I explained the situation, my voice growing more frustrated with each word. Sarah listened quietly, her brow furrowed in concern. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment. Then she took my hand in hers. Tyler, look at me, she said softly. I met her gaze, seeing the love and support that had been my lifeline through this ordeal. You fought so hard, Sarah continued. You've risked everything to expose the truth about Miracle Thin. No one could ever accuse you of selling out or giving up. Maybe it's time to let someone else carry the torch. I opened my mouth to protest, but she held up a hand to stop me. Hear me out. Think of all the good you could do with that settlement money. You could start a foundation to support victims of pharmaceutical negligence. You could fund research into safer weight loss methods. You could still make a difference, just in a different way. Her words resonated, offering a perspective I hadn't considered. Could I do more good by accepting the settlement and using the resources to continue the fight on a different front? As I grappled with the decision, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from Dr. Winters, marked urgent. With a sense of trepidation, I opened it. Tyler, I hope this email finds you well. I've just received word that New Life is planning to restart production of XR7 Wamphtir under a different name. They're claiming to have refined the formula, but from what I've seen, it's the same dangerous compound. I'm doing everything I can to stop this, but I'm hitting walls at every turn. Your voice could make all the difference. I know they're pressuring you to stay quiet, but please, consider going public with everything we know. It might be our last chance to prevent history from repeating itself. I understand if you can't. You've already sacrificed so much. But I had to ask. Stay strong, Amelia. My hands shook as I lowered the phone. The thought of more people suffering as I had, of families being torn apart by the effects of this poison, it was unbearable. In that moment, my decision crystallized. I couldn't stay silent, not when lives were at stake. I looked up at Sarah, determination setting my jaw. I can't take the settlement, I said. I have to testify. I have to tell the whole truth, no matter the cost. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded, squeezing my hand. I know, she whispered. I've never been more proud of you. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Dawson worked tirelessly to prepare me for my testimony, while Dr. Chen ran a battery of tests to ensure I was strong enough for the stress of a trial. Finally, the day arrived. As I stood outside the courtroom, adjusting the tie Sarah had carefully knotted for me, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Whatever happened next, I knew I was doing the right thing. The bailiff called my name, and I took a deep breath, squaring my shoulders. As I walked into the courtroom, I caught sight of the New Life executives, their faces a mixture of anger and fear. But my gaze was drawn to the public gallery, packed with Miracle Thin victims and their families. Their eyes were filled with hope, with the weight of their trust in me to speak for them all. As I took my place on the witness stand, I thought of how far I'd come, from a desperate man willing to risk everything for a quick fix, to someone willing to give up millions to stand up for what was right. The journey had been painful, terrifying, and at times seemingly hopeless. But it had also shown me the strength I never knew I had, the power of community, and the importance of fighting for the truth no matter the cost. I raised my right hand as the clerk began to swear me in. This was it, the moment of truth. As I opened my mouth to speak, I silently renewed my vow to all those who had suffered because of Miracle Thin. I would tell our story, I would fight for justice, and I would do everything in my power to ensure that no one else would ever have to endure what we had. The aftermath of Miracle Thin had changed me forever, but as I prepared to testify, I realized it had also given me a purpose, and that perhaps was the most unexpected miracle of all. The auditorium was packed, a sea of faces turned expectantly towards the stage. The air buzzed with anticipation, punctuated by the occasional cough or rustle of movement. I stood behind the curtain, my heart pounding in my chest, clutching my note cards like a lifeline. "You've got this, Tyler," Sarah whispered, giving my hand a reassuring squeeze. "Just remember why you're here." I nodded, taking a deep breath. It had been 2 years since my testimony had blown the lid off the Miracle Thin scandal. 2 years of grueling recovery, of legal battles, of learning to live in a body forever changed by the ordeal. And now, here I was, about to address the first annual conference of the Phoenix Foundation, an organization born from the ashes of the Miracle Thin tragedy, dedicated to supporting victims of pharmaceutical negligence and advocating for stricter industry oversight. The MC's voice boomed through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the founder of the Phoenix Foundation, Mr. Tyler Matthews." A round of applause erupted as I stepped out onto the stage, the bright lights momentarily blinding me. As my eyes adjusted, I saw them, hundreds of faces, many of them familiar from support group meetings and online forums. Fellow survivors, family members, healthcare professionals, all united in their determination to prevent another Miracle Thin disaster. I approached the podium, my legs steady beneath me, a simple act that still felt like a miracle after months of physical therapy. Clearing my throat, I began to speak. 2 years ago, I stood in a courtroom and told the world about how a pill I thought would change my life for the better nearly destroyed me instead. Today I stand before you not as a victim, but as a survivor, as we all are survivors. My gaze swept across the audience, making eye contact with familiar faces. Maria, her once frail body now strong and vibrant. Dr. Winters, whose brave whistleblowing had saved countless lives. Even Jason, who had reached out months after my testimony, full of remorse for his earlier abandonment. The journey that brought us here was not one any of us would have chosen. I continued. We've faced pain, fear, and loss beyond measure, but we've also discovered strength we never knew we possessed, forged bonds that can never be broken, and found a purpose that gives meaning to our suffering. As I spoke, I felt the familiar twinge in my abdomen, a permanent reminder of the damage Miracle Thin had wrought. But instead of flinching from it, I embraced it. It was part of me now, a battle scar that told the story of my survival. Today, we gather not to dwell on the past, but to look to the future. The Phoenix Foundation is more than just a support network. It's a promise that we will never stop fighting for justice, for accountability, and for the safety of all consumers. I went on to outline the Foundation's achievements over the past year, the support groups established in every major city, the legal fund that had helped dozens of victims seek compensation, the awareness campaigns that had reached millions. But our work is far from over, I said, my voice growing passionate. Even now, there are companies out there willing to put profit before people's lives. There are regulators turning a blind eye to dangerous practices. There are desperate individuals, just like I was, willing to risk everything for the promise of a quick fix. The audience hung on every word, many nodding in agreement, some wiping away tears. That's why we're here. To say no more. No more cutting corners. No more burying evidence. No more treating human lives as acceptable collateral damage in the pursuit of profit. As I neared the end of my speech, I stepped away from the podium, wanting to connect more directly with the audience. I want you to look around, I said, gesturing to the packed auditorium. Look at the person next to you. These are not just statistics or case numbers. These are real people, with real stories, real pain, and real courage. We are the faces of the Miracle Thin tragedy, but we are also the faces of hope, of resilience, of change. I paused, letting my words sink in. Then with a smile I delivered my closing lines. We rose from the ashes of Miracle Thin, and like the phoenix we've named ourselves after, we will continue to rise, stronger and more determined with each challenge. Together, we will create a world where no one has to suffer as we did. Thank you. The applause was deafening as I left the stage, my legs shaky with adrenaline and emotion. Sarah was there to meet me, enveloping me in a tight hug. That was incredible, she whispered, her voice choked with pride. As we made our way to the reception area, I was swarmed by well-wishers and fellow survivors, each with a story to share or a word of thanks. It was overwhelming, but in the best possible way. "Tyler!" a familiar voice called out. I turned to see Maria pushing her way through the crowd, her face beaming. "That speech. You said everything we've all been feeling. Thank you." I hugged her tightly, marveling at how far we'd both come. "How are you doing, Maria?" I asked as we pulled apart. Her smile widened. "I'm good. Really good, actually. The doctors say I'm officially in remission, and..." She paused, her eyes sparkling. "I'm pregnant." Joy surged through me. "Maria, that's amazing. Congratulations." As we chatted, catching up on each other's lives, I couldn't help but reflect on the strange, terrible, wonderful journey that had brought us to this point. 2 years ago, we had been strangers, united only by our suffering. Now we were family, bound by something stronger than blood. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of conversations, each one reinforcing the importance of the work we were doing. As the crowd began to thin, I found myself drawn to a quiet corner of the room, needing a moment to process everything. I stood before a large window, gazing out at the city lights. My reflection stared back at me, a face older and wiser than the one that had first swallowed those fateful pills, but also stronger, more assured. Quite a view, isn't it? A voice behind me made me turn. It was Dr. Chen, a glass of champagne in her hand and a warm smile on her face. "Dr. Chen," I greeted her, genuinely pleased to see her. "I'm so glad you could make it." She joined me at the window. "I wouldn't have missed it for the world, Tyler. What you've accomplished here, it's truly remarkable." I shook my head. "I couldn't have done any of it without you, without your care, your dedication." Dr. Chen held up a hand to stop me. "I was just doing my job. You're the one who turned a personal tragedy into a movement. You should be proud." We stood in companionable silence for a moment, both lost in thought. "You know," Dr. Chen said finally, "in all my years of practice, I've never seen anything quite like your case. The extent of the damage, the miraculous recovery. You've rewritten medical textbooks, Tyler." I chuckled softly. Not exactly how I planned to make my mark on the world. Dr. Chen's expression turned serious. "How are you really doing, Tyler? And don't give me the speech version, I want the truth." I considered her question carefully. "Honestly, I'm okay. There are still bad days, days when the pain flares up, when I'm haunted by memories of what happened. But they're getting fewer and farther between. And the good days, they make it all worthwhile." Dr. Chen nodded, satisfied with my answer. And physically? The last scans were clear, I reported. No sign of further deterioration. I'll never be 100% what I was before, but I'm learning to work with what I've got. It's a new normal, I guess. A new normal, Dr. Chen repeated thoughtfully. I like that. It's a good way to look at it. As we continued to chat, I felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over me. For Dr. Chen, for Sarah, for everyone who had been part of this journey. Even for the hardships themselves, which had shaped me into the person I was today. The sound of Sarah calling my name drew me back to the present. Tyler, it's almost time for the candle lighting ceremony. I nodded, turning back to Dr. Chen. Duty calls, I said with a smile. She raised her glass in a toast. To new normals, and to the phoenix rising from the ashes. I made my way to the center of the room, where a large circle had formed. In the middle stood a single unlit candle. As I took my place, Sarah handed me a lighter. Friends, I addressed the gathering, my voice carrying across the now quiet room. We come to the most solemn part of our evening. This candle represents all those we've lost to pharmaceutical negligence, not just to Miracle Thin, but to every drug rushed to market without proper testing. Every side effect swept under the rug, every life deemed an acceptable loss in the pursuit of profit. I paused, allowing the weight of the moment to settle over the room. But it also represents hope, the light that guides us forward, that illuminates the path to a safer, more just future. As I light this candle, I ask each of you to remember why we're here, to remember those we've lost, and to recommit ourselves to the fight ahead. With a steady hand, I lit the candle. Its flame flickered to life, casting a warm glow across the faces of those gathered around. May this light remind us always of our mission, our community, and our unwavering determination to create change. As we stood in silence watching the candle burn, I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be setbacks, challenges, days when the weight of our mission felt overwhelming. But in that moment, surrounded by fellow survivors and allies, watching the candlelight dance in their determined eyes, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. We would prevail. Not just for ourselves, but for every person who might one day be tempted by the false promise of a miracle cure. For every family that might be spared the pain we had endured. For a future where profit never again took precedence over human life. In the soft glow of the candle, I saw not just who we were, but who we were becoming. Survivors, advocates, warriors for change. And in that transformation, in that rebirth from the ashes of tragedy, lay the truest miracle of all.